The other thing to remember is not everyone is going to reciprocate your loyalty. There will be a small percentage that don't, and it's going to hurt. You have to say, that is the price of being the person I want to be.
Welcome to episode 3 of the One Life podcast. I'm your host, Evan Rodriguez. Our goal with this show is to enable and empower you to discover who you are so that you can take full advantage of the one life you have to live. Today's guest is Dr. Timothy Keiningham. Interestingly enough, I was able to find out about Dr. K through his students who shared really positive message, not only online, but personally to me, about how deeply he has impacted them on not only a level as a student, but on a real personal level as well. On top of being a professor, Tim is widely known as a New York Times bestselling author, with his book, The Wallet Allocation Rule, being a massive hit. In total, he has authored or edited 9 books, and also his research has been accepted in top-tier journals in marketing, strategy, and service, and has been covered in Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan Management Review, and the Journal of Marketing Research, just to mention a few. His research has been so prolific that it's been awarded some of the most prestigious awards that can be rewarded to any researcher. Currently, he serves as a Chief Strategy and Client Officer at Rockbridge Associates. Prior to joining Rockbridge, he worked for 17 years in senior officer positions at Ipsos, which is the world's third largest marketing research firm. And prior to starting the interview, as I told Tim, I could talk to him all day, but we had to save some conversation for the actual podcast itself. But without further ado, it's really a privilege and honor. And as a former student of St. John's, I want to say thank you, Dr. K, for the impact that you've made on so many students at St. John's. And thank you so much for coming on and joining us here.
First, Devin, thanks so much for having me. After seeing that you spoke to General Petraeus last week, it seems a little strange that I'm the guy on the show, but I am thrilled. I love being at St. John's, and our students are so wonderful. And although I've had these other jobs that you talk about, the most rewarding job I've ever had is to be a professor for these great students. So anyway, I'm glad to hear that many of them spoke to you positively about me. I can speak positively about them all day long. We have wonderful students, and it's just an honor to be there.
So Tim, as I mentioned during your introduction, you've achieved a lot of success, specifically in marketing and service, and your research, as I said, seems to be prolific. But I want to know a little bit about how your upbringing was, and then how that led to where you are now, because I think that in order to understand who you are now, you really got to know the background. So if you could just talk to us a little bit about that, I think that would give us a really good perspective on how you got to where you are now.
Okay. I was born in Kentucky. I don't remember my birthplace. It was Campbellsville, Kentucky, because my mom was there for college. And then she moved to Owensboro, Kentucky, which is farther west. And it's a town of about between 50 and 60,000 people. And I spent most of my young life there until I went to graduate school. My mom was a single parent from the time I was 3. I had a brother who was 1 year younger than me. So I was 3, he was 2. We were broke most of the time. For at least the first part of my life. And yeah, that wasn't a lot of fun. My mom wanted to be a music teacher. Ultimately, she got to do that, but she would do her teaching work in the morning, and she would work in the hospital as a receptionist at night. And money was always tight. The lights would be turned off with me in the house by myself, that kind of stuff. It wasn't pretty at the time, but it taught me a lot. It taught me that your circumstances don't make you less of a person, right? my mom was deeply religious. I think that was probably the biggest thing that kept us sound. She would direct music at a small church, actually in a rural community right outside of our town. And that became kind of my second family. Um, and if you're in Kentucky and you go to church, you're usually a Protestant and you're in church all the time. So you're in church on Sunday morning, you're in church on Sunday night, you're in church on Wednesday night, and then you have choir practice at some place. So that network taught me a lot. One of the things that my mom also had was kind of a magical realism about the world. This idea that you have a divine purpose, and that there's a tangible God looking out for you. And I still believe that. And so my wife believes that. It's funny because my wife is from Turkey with totally different background, but we talk about it. And you don't, it changed how I saw things, right? And you realize that circumstances aren't fair. But if you let them own you, then you're not going to get what you're supposed to do while you're here. In terms of defining my success, I don't know that I would call myself successful, because I'm one of these guys who doesn't like to look back. When the time comes for me to look back, I want it to be when I'm really, really old and I'm about to go, and everybody I love is around the table saying, hey, because there's so many things I still want to do. So I don't know. I mean, I don't like to think in terms of having gotten where I want to be. And I think that keeps me moving and keeps my wife moving. And because we have these kinds of conversations all the time about, we don't know what the path is and what the plan is, and we always pray about it, but we're going to keep going forward because we believe that that's why we're here. Probably the smartest decision I made was when I decided that I wasn't going to be a rock star, which that was my goal. And I was laugh, as I say to my kids, which are my students, it's still going to happen. I'm just waiting it out. And so I went to Vanderbilt to get my MBA. And that was a big eye opener, because that was the first time I'd actually not spent most of my time in Owensboro, Kentucky. And by the way, Owensboro is a great place to grow up. It's kind of Norman Rockwell, right? Except with barbecue, lots of barbecue. And there I got to see all kinds of different people, and to live in with a different mentality. Because even when I was in college, I had international friends, because it was a nice place to send I went to Kentucky Wesleyan College, and we had for a small school, we had a large international population. But it wasn't the same. They were in my home, and I didn't really know their home. When I went out into Nashville, I started getting to experience more people, different views. And I won't lie, I hated every second of my time at Vanderbilt. And not because of them doing anything wrong. It's because I had so much in my head about how the world's supposed to work, right? And it was funny because I had made the right connections, and I started working on things that ultimately led to my career. I mean, things that shouldn't have happened. But I got to write my first book with a couple of professors there, and this is shortly after my graduation. And they assumed, because I was really into the work we were doing, that I must have been like this great student or whatever, which I wasn't a terrible student, but I wouldn't call myself like the gung-ho guy that's going to have the business school on his shirt, right? And I remember they had a friend of mine. He's still a dear friend now. He was a professor from New Zealand. His name was Rod Brody. His name is Rod Brody, and just a big deal in my field. And so we're sitting around a table at a Thai restaurant, and my mentor, Roland Rust, has left to go to the restroom. And so Rod is going to ask me a softball question so that we can start our conversation, because he doesn't know me. And he said, Tim, what did you think of Owen, which is the name of the business school? And before he finished the word, I said, it was the worst 2 years of my life. I hated every second of it. To which he went, all righty then. And there was silence at the table until our friend came back. And it's funny because I look now and I think, okay, yeah, there were a lot of things that they could have done better at the school, but most of the problem was me, right? Most of the problem was me. But you don't realize that while you're in it, right? You're young and you're headstrong and you don't really understand everything that all the externalities that affect how things can get done. But that experience actually taught me a lot about how I wanted to teach, right? Ultimately, because for me, it always felt like someone would come in and say, "I'm smart. You're not smart." Not all of them. I made some really close friends there too, but this idea, I'm waiting for Socrates to come in, and oh, how lucky I am. You know, I don't feel like that now. So one of the first things I make a point of telling my students is, I'm not smarter than you are. I'm not smarter than any of you. I just have more experience about this topic than you do. I won't always be right. And that's okay. And, you know, you're allowed to challenge me. You are allowed to challenge me because that's the only way the truth ever happens. And so you need to be comfortable doing that. And I always tell them, be careful. You know, if you find a person, people you can work with where that can happen, then life is very good, right? Most of the time, that's not going to happen, right? So you have to know who you can push for the truth and who you have to go, okay, they're just passing the order down. And you, Devin, you're going to have that happen to you. You're going to be in the military, and there are points where you ultimately you're going to say, here's my opinion. And at the same time, you only have one boss, right? In the end, there's a chain. And the same thing happens as when I was chief strategy officer at Ipsos. You know, everybody's opinion matters, and then at some point you have to make a decision, and then you have to go down that path. My problem was I wasn't willing to listen to other people's decisions when I was a young man. Over time, I mean, that headstrongness helped me as a researcher because it helped me to challenge things, right? Because the secret to being a scientist is to be a skeptic, right? They bring you things and you say, that doesn't make any sense. Or why would that not be true, right? That's the usual. Why wouldn't that be true all the time? And I have to say, I made most of my early reputation on challenging things that were conventional wisdom. And then, thank God, I was right, or I could prove that I was right to a sufficient number of people that my reputation was advanced. But I also had another advantage. I was doing scientific research when I worked in industry, so nothing could hurt my career. You know, people are like, you take high risk stuff. I'm like, there's no risk to me at all. Right? What are you going to do to me? You're going to suddenly tell me I'm no longer an executive at this company? Good luck with that, right? The worst you can do is not publish my stuff. Okay, it's still going to get published. And fortunately, I'd made a lot of friends because they, in the process, who were all super nice people. And I was fiercely loyal to them. You know, I would do anything, right, to make sure that they're successful and happy and all that. And you end up building this network of people who know that you're going to be with them when the fire comes, right? If something bad was happening to them, I didn't leave them either, right? So whatever success I have, and I would say that that's a limited thing, but I owe it to so many people for, as I said, for climbing the trees with me, right? And keeping me safe from falling off. So anyway, that's how I ultimately started out, and that's my early experience. And St. John's appealed to me because as this not very wealthy kid, um, St. John's had this mission, right, that I buy into completely. And it's a mission that I learned from my wife, who's at a Jesuit school. She works at Fordham. She's a professor of marketing, just like I am, and she's also the associate dean of the business school there. And I was working as an executive. I'd gotten as high as I wanted. I'm a chief strategy officer at a big company. I don't want to be anything else. It's not like I want to run a country or I want to run the company. I'm like, no, this is it. This is all I want. The problem is that once you get all you want, it becomes work. And it becomes a lot less fun. And that's not a problem for the company. The company's great. And the people were, like at any company, things you love, things you don't love, but that's life. But my wife would come home every day and she would tell me some story about how the university had pulled all this resources together to help somebody. I'm like, wow, there's a point where you go, and I'm making the shareholders more money. And that isn't the same feeling. It's not a terrible feeling, but there's a point where you go, everybody's going to say this at some point in their life, and they're going to say, is that all? Is that all? And for me, that wasn't going to work. So fortunately for me, my connections, having helped some and made connections with some wonderful faculty at St. John's, I had the opportunity to make this transition. And I got to tell you, it's just amazing. And it's amazing not because I get to teach. It's amazing because my students are so amazingly awesome. I look out and I'm going, man, this is the America that I want. And I tell everyone, stop worrying about the future. I'm teaching the future, right? Yeah, we've screwed up a whole bunch of stuff, but we have a bunch of people who are really smart and driven by a mission to be successful and make the world a better place, and they're really going to be able to do it. And it makes me happy. It makes me really happy. As I also say to my wife, I'm not too worried about when I wake up in hell. I'll have a bunch of people in heaven throwing ropes down. So at least I hope so. Because when you're at a university and you come from business, the first thing you think is, this is the most inefficient system I've ever seen, right? Right? Because you're like, how does IT work again? What do you mean I can't get this fixed right now? And how come you do these weird things with expenses and whatever? And yeah, okay, it's all true, right? They don't run a university like a business. But what they do understand, the business don't understand, is how important it is that everybody knows that they matter, right? You can't be a good university if you don't do that. And at St. John's, I would say that they do it better than most, right? Because they really do care. It's funny, I'm in these meetings with the faculty meetings. They have them every month for the business school. And it's the faculty that come up and talk about the mission. Are we living up to this mission that we say we're about? And that is a pretty cool thing. Even people that may not teach the way I think they should or whatever, they're not, they're all in their heart want to make that happen. And that's a great thing to be a part of. But anyway, I didn't become successful, I don't feel like, until I actually started this job. Because every day I come home, I'm happy. I actually have an hour and 15-minute commute in, an hour and 30-minute commute out, and I'm happy the whole time because I'm going to see you. The hardest thing for me has been doing this online stuff because I'm a teacher who shakes hands with every student, you know, and just wants to be there for them when they need it. And you know, we're human animals. You know, we need contact. And as much as I love Zoom and as much as I love this podcasting stuff, the reality is we need to be able to experience each other, to be able to look in their eye and know they actually care. And anyway, it's that's a long talk. I apologize. I didn't give you a chance to breathe.
Tim, I got a lot out of it, and I wrote down a bunch of notes. And one of the first things that I think that I recently made a post on LinkedIn, and it got like 300,000 views, like 7,000 likes. And it made me realize one thing. And all I did in the post was that I laid out that in high school, I was rejected from 10 out of 12 colleges. I had average SAT scores. I was the person that was ridiculed and mocked by everyone else because I didn't get into the same schools that they got into. But then I went on to a college into St. John's, which is one of those two schools. And I was able to achieve, you know, a perfect GPA, poets and quants, top 100 business student. And it really made me realize the fact that your circumstances don't define you. And there were multiple people that commented that the fact that I noticed that was inspiring to them, and it inspired them to notice that I'm stuck in this position now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to stay trapped in this position. And it really went back for me, back to when I was bullied for about 6 years in middle school. And it goes back, a lot of it, to what our world is experiencing right now when it goes back to race and so forth. And I was a victim of it. And I was blessed enough, and I'll never forget this one time. My parents asked me continuously, do you want to go to a different school? Do you want us to transfer you out? And my parents never understood it. I never understood it, but I always said no every single time that they asked me. And now as I look back, I realized that if I would have said yes, I would have let somebody else determine my future for me. And that would have been the worst thing that I could have ever done. I wanted to be the one to take the reins and really steer the ship. So like what you were saying about how you grew up with the lights having to be turned off when your mother wasn't home, that could have been something that you utilized to keep you in the same position. But I think it's so inspiring how you went from where you were to what you not only achieved, but I think that to hear in your voice that I could really genuinely hear that it sounds like you found what you really love to do. Like you said, you come home every day with a huge smile on your face. And that was one of the other big things that I talk about. And personally, as I was mentioning to you prior, faith is really big to me, and finding that divine purpose, as you put it, is really important. And it sounds to me like once you stepped into that teaching role, it was like, this is really what I was meant to do. And maybe you can answer, maybe I'm correct or not, but from what I'm hearing, it sounds like when you left the business world, achieved, like you said, there was nothing else you wanted to achieve. And then you went to go teaching, which some people might look as a step down from being, you know, a big strategy officer to being a professor. But for you, it was a period in your life where you said, now it's time for me to pay it forward, it sounds like. And that's what I find most inspiring.
Well, I always say I wish I'd done this sooner, actually. I love it. Do I make as much money? No. Okay. It turns out that making a lot of money doesn't make you happier. Now, being poor makes you unhappy. No kidding about it, right? Because the world is very inconvenient if you make too little money, right? But after a certain threshold, making more money does not make you happier. That's a big part of our research. My wife and I researched these things, and we're not the only people who know this. But there's lots of psychologists, prominent psychologists, that do research in this space. And you know, after a certain level, that extra money doesn't really matter. Daniel Gilbert, who is probably one of the leading, well, he's definitely one of the leading advocates of experts on happiness. He's at Harvard. he has a line. I've learned that I won't take $200,000 over time with my grandchildren. Because I do enough research to know it's going to take a lot more than $200,000 for me to get more happiness than I get from that time with them. And I feel that way. There's another person I follow who gets a lot of controversy because he's not always right, but I follow Tony Robbins a lot. In fact, I actually designed my class to follow a Tony Robbins style. Not exactly.
By the way, Tim, I am a massive Tony Robbins fan. So he is not controversial with me. Okay, so he is phenomenal. But like I said, he's okay in my book, Tim. I just wanted you to know that.
Okay, but I make a point of trying to have that level of energy and to try to get these complicated ideas down to simple rules that we can follow to live by. I mean, class should be about not just learning the technique, but how to live a better life, right? That's the thing that I always find interesting is some of my students will say from my service marketing class, all right, I came here to learn marketing. I learned how to be a better person, right? Something to that effect. And it's like, yeah, but that's what we're supposed to be doing in all of our classes, believe it or not. Even in these finance, accounting classes, whatever, there's a way to live that should be implicitly taught, right? In here, how do you work this? You have to learn the skill, but knowing the skill is the the baseline. How do you get above that? Anyway, Tony Robbins had this great thing about talking about, if you want to be successful, you can do all these things, but in the end, the only way to be fulfilled is to give of yourself to others. And you probably have heard him say that many different times, but that's the only way to be fulfilled. And it's very, very true. I found it when I was an executive, and I find it as a professor. But the nice thing about doing it as a professor is the rewards are right there in front of you. You look and you look at these young men and women and you go, this is the future of my country. This is the future of my world. I am far more hopeful than I would be had I not known them. I have no doubt that they're going to do great things. And, being in a Vincentian institution, I say things that may be perceived as sacrilegious, but I always say a few things like this. One is, look, I'm not looking for all of you to become this. All I need are 12 really committed individuals, and we can start a religion. Right? And that's kind of what we're looking for, right? Oh, I'm sorry, Devin. You're about to meet someone. Come here for a second. I got to hide.
Hey.
This is my son, Max. Max, I'm on a podcast. I promise we'll be back, and we will do your video right when this is done, okay? Okay. Can I have a kiss? Okay, I love you. Okay. All right, I'll be with you just a few minutes, son, okay? All right, Devin, I'm sorry.
No problem.
He's my joy. Well, they're all my joy, but anyway. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought entirely watching him come in. I feel like the guy, the professor, when his child comes in, he's on with talking about North Korea. He's from Korea. Do you remember that? And his child comes in,
Yeah, I've seen that.
on the bed, and then the baby comes in, and then his wife comes in to get them out, and he can't get up because he's not wearing pants, right? He's got his suit on from the top up, but he can't stand up and take care of the problem. I am wearing pants, but I'm just wearing a shirt. So it's not that big a deal for me to stand up, but I'd be wearing like gym trunks. So, because as you said, it's casual. Anyway, I love my job. Success is about, are you happy with your life? And there's a few things that you can't get out of your career to make you happy with your life. And I will say this to anyone: marry well if you're going to marry. because that partner of yours is going to build you up or not, right? Mine makes me, it makes my life better. I always think I would not be here if it wasn't for my wife. I wouldn't be. I wouldn't feel like I could just go and make my world happen. So you can be super successful in the business world and completely unhappy, and that happens. I met those people. I used to work with those people, and I'm like, that's not a fair trade. Money isn't going to substitute for those things. We were watching, my wife and I were watching like old episodes of 30 Rock because just a laugh. And there's a scene where Alec Baldwin has a heart attack, and he's near death, and he comes in, and Tina Fey is next to his bed, and he goes, yeah, I realized I should have worked more. Right? No one says that ever, right? So that part of your life has to get right. Make sure that you're surrounded by people that love you. And I don't mean necessarily your mate, but you need to have people that love you for who you are and love you regardless of how your day went. Other than that, without that, nothing else is going to work. Then you have to say, okay, I've got those things covered. I still have to accomplish something in this life. God gave me these talents, and I have to use them, whatever they are. And maybe I don't even know I have them. Like Devin, your story resonates, right? I was denied this, that, and the other thing. People made fun of me. They gave me a hard time, whatever, right? Everybody's there to tear you down. I shouldn't say everybody, or as Charles Barkley used to call it, crabs in a barrel, right? There's no problem finding people trying to pull you back in the barrel. You need a few people that are going to believe in you, but you had to get out of the barrel still. You have to do it. And you have to keep going forward. And for that, you have to have a North Star. And as I used to say, I don't know where I'm going, but I know this is the direction I'm supposed to be heading. I don't know why. I just feel it. When I started out doing this work in service, it was not a popular field. In fact, it was a joke in marketing. It's now one of the largest fields in the space. But for the most part, people considered it a joke. Why would I want to do this? This isn't what marketing is about. But for me, the reason I did it was because of one of my mentors. His name is Roland Rust. He's a big name. I mean, the reason I know I'm not successful in my space is the level of difference between his name and my name as an academic is enormous. But super close friend. I'm so very fortunate that he's been a part of my life. And when we started out, I just started doing this work because I thought it sounded interesting. I was a kid, right? I'd graduated with my MBA. I was just like you. Not as handsome, but I was just like you, right? And we start working, and then there's a chance to have this book that we're going to work on and stuff. And I'm like, whatever, this is great. I'm in. And so I said, Roland, why do you do this service stuff? Why are we doing this? And he said to me, Tim, I used to have a public advocacy group, and we would protest. He goes, I used to be a big advertising researcher, and I had this public advocacy group, and we would protest companies that would do deceptive advertising. And I'm trying to picture him out there with a sign, And he said, it didn't take me very long to realize I was having zero impact. And I'm like, of course, you're an idiot. Because nobody goes to work and says, I'm a bad person, right? They just don't say that because they don't think that way, because they're not, right? And he said, what I realized is that if I could show managers how they could win by doing the right thing, they would do it. If I could show them how to do the right thing and win doing that, they'll do it. And that was it. Lights, just fireworks went off in my head. I realized that being in business wasn't about being some sort of cog in the machine, this kind of two-dimensional figure, right? That is all about making money and not about it. It's not you're not choosing a life to become Ebenezer Scrooge, right? You are here to make the world a better place, and this is a way to do that. And that's how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. I didn't know how this was going to work and how we could make it work because no one was taking us seriously. Now, the good thing is when you're in a space that nobody's in, I shouldn't say nobody, but not that many people are in, and it's a small space and it's growing, it looks like you're great. It's just the mountain is growing underneath you, right? More and more people are coming in and starting to realize you're right and you're early. And so you are getting added credibility, right? And you know the issues better. So I was really very blessed to get in with one of the leaders in the space at the early time in the space, to do good work for them and to be somebody they respected. And I got in early at a high profile way. So all of those things work to my advantage. And I believe very strongly that God gave me that opportunity because he knew that I wouldn't quit it. Yeah, that's the other, we talk about having a kind of a religious view. I'm like, why would God do this for me? Well, my personal opinion is he knows I'm stubborn enough not to quit. Or as my wife said, I say to my wife, why do you do this? She goes, well, I just don't want to be inside the fish. And she was like, my wife actually is from Turkey, so she doesn't have to understand that reference. So I read her the story of Jonah and the fish, and it's like, in the end, you get, if you say you're not going to do it, and you know you have to do it, you just get inside of something that makes you miserable, and then ultimately you get spit back out, and you go do it anyway. I'd rather avoid being in the fish if I'm going to have to do it anyway. And so that's kind of the way I live, because I had several kind of near-death experiences that were very strange. One that happened early. It's going to seem really weird. Are you sure do you want me to talk about these things?
Absolutely. This only adds to it, honestly, Tim. I love it.
Well, the first one was when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I actually talk about it in my Lovelock acceptance speech. I'm sorry, that's the Lifetime Achievement Award for my field. And I seen this nature video and they showed how apes made their beds in trees. And I lived in this place where there was a lot of big trees. And my mom, because she was working all the time, she wasn't home all the time. So I would walk home from school, first grade. I'd be there by myself until, the evening before my mom could come in. And so I went up in this tree. I put a blanket up in the tree, pressed on the branches, and I lie down on top of it. And I fell asleep. And the next thing I know, I am sliding. I'm falling head first toward the earth. Of course, I don't even know that. I don't know what's happened to me. I open my eyes, and I am literally coming fast toward the earth. And I'm a good 40, 50 feet in the air, coming down this way, head up. And I ultimately feel myself get placed on my gravel driveway, slowly my head, then my body, and then I just slide down the driveway, completely unharmed. But I wasn't worried because I felt like I was held by these two hands or these two angels kind of thing. And I felt, and when I still distinctly remember when I land, I have this sensation of these spiritual things flying away from me. And I'm like, okay. But my mom lived in such a magical realism world that kind of just sounded normal to me. And another time, more recently, before my youngest son was born, but when my two older children were much younger, I was building a retaining wall on this side of this house, the house I owned at the time. And I knew it was going to, there was this hillside that would have been a pretty nasty fall. And I went out there stupidly in the rain because I was like lugging rocks on my shoulders and all that stuff, bags of rocks. And anyway, I lost control and I started slipping. It was like a comedy thing. And I went up into the air and I was like, okay, I'm going to die because I'm going off the side of this thing. I mean, so I just closed my eyes. I remember like, okay, it's time for me to go. And I was like, okay, I wasn't happy at the time either. I was pretty miserable. And I was like in this electric cloud for I don't know how long. And I hear God talk to me. And he just says, it's not your time. You have much to do. And I was like, I was done. I felt like I was completely burnt. And then I got placed in this bush of bright and like I have my eyes closed the whole time. And I say, okay, God, you saved my life, but how do I get back up this hill? And there was a tree that was over my chest. And I just grabbed it and it lifted me back onto the hill. And so I pretty much know that I have to do something. That's kind of the way my mind works now. And so I'd like to say that God tells you what you're going to never have that work out. It's like having headlights on a car and you're going to Los Angeles in the dark. You know, it's just enough to keep you on the road, but so far away from knowing what the destination looks like, right? But those things like that happen throughout our lives. And frequently we just try, after it happens, we ignore that it happened, right? Or we assign some sort of logic to it. I don't try to assign some sort of logic to it. It happened, whether there's a scientific explanation or a medical explanation, fine. For me, though, nothing's going to change the human experience I had. And it gives me this sense that every day that I have wasn't promised to me, right? I could have lost my life at 6. I could have lost my life at that time when I was going. All of those things could have happened. And yet I had a very strong sense that I was saved by something for a reason. And that reason for me is becoming more and more manifest. I get to teach students like you who are going to be great, really great, not great like your professor great. I mean, like great, like you will be president of the United States great, or you will rule a company one day, or you are going to come up and make some big difference on the planet and everyone's going to know your name. I don't care if everyone knows my name.
Right, Tim. Yeah. One thing that I really like that you said was something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but essentially that kind of those experiences make you realize how precious your time is and how thankful you are for every day. And I feel like for me personally, when I don't have any experience that is similar to yours, but I had an experience in 2016 in which I lost my grandmother very suddenly. 1 week I was by her house, and she was an old Italian woman. She was 77 at the time, but she strayed off the boat from Italy. The cutest Italian woman you could imagine. I would go over her house. She would make me food without even knowing if I was coming. So I showed up and she told me she just made it in case I would show up. And then sure enough, I showed up. But we ate dinner, and then she asked me if I wanted to sleep over her house. And I told her I couldn't because I was going to go to my internship the next day in the city, and it was much easier to leave from my house because the A train was closer than it was from me than it was from her. Sure enough, she went into the hospital a couple of days later with a minor stomach ache. And then while she was in, they wanted to keep her for the night to do some tests. She wound up having a massive heart attack. And then she turned septic and started, poisoning herself from the inside and so forth. And then within a matter of a week, she was gone. The next time I saw her, she was on life support. And then I could never go back and tell her, yes, I will sleep over. It's okay if I have to take that extra 10 minutes to walk. And that just killed me in the moment, but kind of also similar to what you were saying. I feel like although she died and it was a horrible thing, I feel like it was such a blessing at the same time, because it gave me such a new perspective on how I look at everything. So when I came to college and I started to get a lot of coursework and I changed my major my sophomore year, so now I was having to take 7 classes every semester in order to keep up. But it was never so stressful because I always had the perspective that that experience of losing her so suddenly and never being able to go back and say, yes, I'll sleep over, that was stressful. So now I just took every moment as, man, I'm grateful to even have this opportunity to stay here and take this class, or to go and do this service trip in Los Angeles in Skid Row for this week. I never looked at it as if this was too much on my plate. Just to be able to have the plate in the first place was so important to me. Like you were saying, it sounds like, if I'm understanding correctly, that gratitude really enables you to live life fulfilled.
I won't lie about that. Perspective makes all the difference in the world. I'm sorry you had to lose your grandmother for that to happen. At the same time, you had a lot of wonderful memories. It's obvious with her. Thank God for those, right? Yeah, it's strange, right? We live as if every day is going to be the same tomorrow, and we all know it's not true, right? Gratitude is the most important thing that we don't have enough of. I have a friend, his name is Chester Elton. He's a big name in the customer appreciation space, and I definitely want you to interview him. Okay, he's a bigger name in the space than I am. He speaks all over the place, just a wonderful human being. But they call him the apostle of appreciation. Right? And he has what he calls the carrot principles, but it's one of the things I learned a lot from him, and that is, you have to not just be grateful for your life, but to show appreciation to others that you are grateful for them. And as a manager, and as a leader, this will be harder in the military setting. But when you're ultimately running a company, you have to find a way to say positive things to people, because we are so geared to pointing out the failures that we ignore all the great things that people are doing. And they had all these like weird little simple things. Like he would do a story by like talk about one manager where he learned to put 10 pennies in one pocket. And he would walk and see other people, and every time made a point of, every time he said something that was relevant, it wasn't some sort of thank all you faceless masses kinds of thing, but relevant to that person, in thanking that person. Then he would take a penny and he would move it to the other pocket, and he needed to make sure before the day was over that all pennies were in the other pocket. Just little tools, right? And he would say, when you thank someone, right, it needs to be specific, it needs to be direct to them for what they did. And he was very big on writing things. Write it down, write them a small whatever, because it suddenly becomes you doing that, right? I've learned so much from this man, because you don't want to overkill everything, and you don't want to say everything is awesome, because then you sound like that Lego movie or something. And you won't know that, but I had to watch that because my son is young, as you saw. And but you do need to make sure that when people see you, they recognize that you know who they are and that you care about them. Several things that I did learn from being a boss, I apply at school. Like I would, every day when I came into the office, I spent the first part of the day, the first thing I did was go to every person who happened to be in that office and shake their hand, ask them how they're doing, talk to them about something relevant. Yeah, okay, that took me 30, 45 minutes, but it was important. I got to know them as people, and they got to know me as people. And so, you knew when they needed help, they were willing to come to you when there was a problem. right? And when I start class now, I ask two questions, that are most important to me to help understand how to make the class useful for them. One is, what's your dream job after graduation? And the other is, what problem were you put on this earth to help solve? What problem were you put on this earth to help solve? Well, then now, once I know that about you, when there is something that's relevant to you achieving one of those two things, I can direct the conversation that way. Because each example can be different. But now I know what matters to you. I know why you care. And when I say it doesn't seem relevant to you, let me tell you, it's relevant to you achieving your dream. And the same thing would happen at work. If I knew what your dreams were, I knew about your family, I knew your dreams, when something was coming up that I needed to have done, and yeah, you may not have wanted to do it, but it was actually important for you achieving your career goals, I could explain why you should do this, why you need this in a way that's relevant to you getting what you want out of life. Because it's just like training. Nobody likes to train. We all want to hold the trophy. Why do you need to do this exercise? Well, you need to do this exercise because if you don't have that part of it, you will not, somebody will beat you at something else, right? And I know you work out a lot. I saw some videos of you out there. There's nothing fun about some of the workout routine you do, right? Absolutely nothing. I tell my wife, I hate working out. I do it all the time. Why? Because I don't like the alternative, right? And I know that if I don't do this, then I won't get the things that I want. I won't be able to be a great teacher. I won't be able to maybe be as strong as I need to be when my son is graduating college, And I want to, I can't promise the future, but I can at least make the odds go better for me, right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase the likelihood we reach the destination we desire. And I can only do that by showing gratitude and appreciation and showing people sometimes you got to stretch, but they won't want to do it if they don't trust you. If they think you're only in it for you, they're not all in. But if they really believe that you have their interest at heart, then they become all in, even on something that didn't seem like something they would want to do in the first place. Anyway, remind me to introduce you to Chester Elton. For those of you who haven't read any of his work, it's very easy. It's Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton. He has books like The Carrot Principle. If you want to find out what motivates you, they actually have a book called What Motivates Me, and they have like an assessment you can take to show you actually what it takes to motivate people. Different people have different things that motivate them. Anyway, I love my life now because I'm so grateful for the things I have in it, and very little of it has to do with having money. Very little of it.
Right, Tim. One of the things that you said about appreciation, this conversation brings back a lot of memories for me, and a lot of things that I saw at the time as I was failing at, like my grandmother. At the time, I was like, "Oh my God, how come I said no?" And then this other experience is also what I looked at time as, man, I'm really screwing up. But now as I look back, it was the biggest blessing. And it was an ROTC freshman year, and it goes back to leading people and building these relationships like you were talking about. But I was the person who I was able to come into ROTC my freshman year, and I was physically fit. I was doing well academically, and I was getting perfect scores on the physical fitness test. And I was the guy that was telling my classmates, let's go, come on, why aren't you giving it your all? Why are you going 70% when we should really be going 80%, 90%, 100%, 110%? And then I soon noticed that I was secluding myself from everybody, and everybody was not liking me very much. I wasn't having influence over anybody. Instead of having that positive influence, which I actually wanted, people started to think that I was trying to promote myself to be like the king on the hill and showing how I was so great. and I didn't want anyone else to be as great as me. And then, like you were just saying, it took a captain at the time, now he's a major, Captain Sellers. He told me, Devin, nobody cares about how much you know until they know how much you care. And then once he told me that, I started to take a step back, and it was so true, because I hadn't invested in any time getting to know about, did they have any dogs? Did they have any cats? What was their favorite hobby? What was important to them? Like you said, what are their goals, aspirations, dreams? I wasn't doing any of that. I was just so focused on, why are you not putting out at PT, physical training, each and every day? Why are you only giving, half effort? Well, and through other mentors in ROTC, Master Sergeant Alexander, he always told me, he was like, well, why don't you ask them what's going on in their personal life? Maybe they're having a hard time at home. Maybe their parents are going through something and it's affecting them. But I was never building that relationship my freshman, my sophomore year, because I was just so focused on that. I feel like I was in a box and I couldn't see out of the box, and my self-awareness was just not there. But once I started to understand it, things started to slowly get better. But on the other hand, the relationships couldn't 100% be recovered because of the initial thoughts that they had of me. So I had multiple people come up to me and say, yeah, you got a lot better. But there was always some type of little bit of friction there, because they remembered me as being that person I was freshman, sophomore year. And then also the 1 Minute Manager, which is a classic book, talked about 1 minute praises and 1 minute reprimands, like you were talking about with the 10 pennies, which that's an amazing thing that I hope to talk to him about. But like you said, I feel a lot of the time that if people just got told, like even in my personal life, if someone might have told me, you did a really good job with that, and even if it was the smallest thing, it might have made my whole day. And then in turn, I would have wanted to probably follow that person just a little bit more and go the extra mile for him. And Professor Hegarty at St. John's, he's a management professor. He says, everybody has a voice, but not everybody has a vote. But as long as you let people have that voice, they're eventually going to buy into what decision you make, because you showed them that their opinion matters. So can you just speak a little bit, because I'm curious as to something you said before we started, that your ability to succeed is largely depends on your ability to persuade, and how much that correlates to building that relationship that largely depends on trust.
Well, that's actually a loaded question, because it has a lot of parts to it. Okay, obviously you have to show appreciation. You have to know how people live. The hard part for me, and this is I'm gonna have to use a term that I shouldn't use on here, but I would hire even analysts, and I would tell them, your most important job is to tell me when I'm full of shit. Okay, that's your job, because the only way I'm going to be saved is if the people around me are saving me from making a stupid error that ultimately hurts everybody, right? Yeah, I may be leading, right? And I want you to follow. In the end, when we make a decision, you got to go, but you got to keep me from making ridiculously wrong decisions, right? And I'll give you an example of that. I've written several books, and the book prior to the wallet allocation rule was one called Why Loyalty Matters. I really love this book. So it talks about the philosophies we're having here and how you have to build these connections. But as my wife and I had written it, I would take my chapters and I would have analysts around the company look at it, read it, and tell me what they thought. And most would come back with not very helpful things. They'd come back with something equivalent to, this is the best thing since the Bible kind of stuff, right? And you're like, yeah, that's not going to help me. I had one new analyst there. He came in and he just ripped me. He ripped everything I wrote. He destroyed it. And it was like watching, an old Western where the town is on fire. Okay, he ruined everything I said, and he did it and there was nothing gentle about it either. He was like, this is wrong. And he just kept going why this was wrong. I was like, wow. He had a master's, and turns out he had a master's in sociology from Durham, which is a super good school in the UK. And he knew these topics really well, and he could tell why they were. And so I'm sitting there just getting ripped. And I went to my wife and I said, everything he said is right. He saved me. We would have looked like idiots. But everybody else is telling me it's great. He saved me. And so we went back to him and I said, his name is Luke Williams. I said, Luke, we really appreciate everything. Would you be interested in being the editor for this book? And he said, yeah. And so he starts working, and he's really helping us in this book. And he worked so much that we couldn't not make him an author. Right? So we make him an author of that book. And then when Wallet Allocation Rule came out, he was a with author on the first book, on that book. And the current book, the Wallet Allocation Rule, he's listed as it's Keiningham, Axoy, which is my wife's maiden last name, and Williams. His willingness to save me and my receptiveness to that, right? Yeah, his delivery was pretty scary. I mean, it was like the difference between being a chief strategy officer and him was enormous, okay? And yet we had built enough of a relationship that he knew I was serious, that I wanted the truth. And he was willing to give it to me, and it saved me. But that's happened a lot. Throughout my career, there's always been someone going, you need to rethink this. You need to rethink this. And you only get that if you've built enough of a relationship with people that they can do it. One of the things that I used to do is just make lots of silly jokes. I make lots of silly jokes in the class. There's a lot of reasons for that, because students tend to go out, right? And then it takes 10 minutes to get them back. And so I'm like, you're never going to know what I'm going to say, so you have to kind of be aware all the time, right? And the easiest way is to say some sort of outrageously silly thing. And they go, wait, did I hear that right? Right. And so that keeps them in. And they also realize that you're not taking it so seriously that you act like these are the 10 commandments or something that you just brought down, right? Nothing you're saying should be treated like that. It's still just business, right? When I would do the same kind of thing at work, and I had, this was when I was an SVP at the time, a senior vice president, I'm sorry. One of the people I hired, nice guy, he goes, why do you do this? I said, okay. How many SVPs are in this office? And, there were probably 7 or 8. So how many do you know? 1. How many are you are you able to have a conversation with? 1. Now you understand why. Now you understand why. Because once you have that rapport built, and these jokes, by the way, I would let them make jokes at my expense, and I thought they were hilarious. Once I knew they were willing to make a joke at my expense, I no longer worried that they would be willing to tell me the truth. Because they knew that I was not going to lose it. It wasn't one of these things where it all went one way. I wanted them to make me laugh at my, there were half the time people were suddenly making me whoever the lead character is in The Office, right? I was like, I don't care. I don't care, because when I need you to come with me, you're going to come with me. And you also feel comfortable that you can say things and I'm not going to lose it. As long, if you did insubordination, I said, we have to do this. It's company, that I would lose it over. But nobody's doing insubordination kinds of things. They're doing things to make sure we are successful and that we don't have things go off the rails. Well, you're not going to get that because the hierarchy works for you that way. The hierarchy doesn't work that way. The hierarchy works where everything flows down. You need things to flow up, because if they don't, you start to think everything you're doing is awesome. I'll give you a simple example from my personal life. I used to say things like, it'd be great if you do this, or if you thought about doing it, why don't we check that out? And I would think that people would understand. I mean, you don't have to do that. But at work, nobody ever does that when you're the chief strategy officer. Next thing you know, they go, what a great idea. Let's go do that. I come home and I'm with my wife. I start doing that stuff. And she's like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And I'm like, okay. And after a while, she's like, you do realize I don't work for you, right? I don't work for you. I work with you because we write a lot of paper, but I don't work for you. And then suddenly it started to click to me, wait a second, my ideas aren't great. They're doing this because they built a relationship with me and they think that that's how this works. And so it actually told me I have to go back and make sure people understand I have to say things differently so they understand. I only want them to do things that seem to make sound sense and to push back when they don't, right? But I wouldn't have known that had my wife not said that to me out loud. Yeah, come on, you're starting to think your ideas are great because everybody's telling you they're great. You move away from that, and it's easy for that to happen. It's very easy to believe your own press releases. Don't ever believe your own press release, right? I always laugh when I read the description of me, or even the one you gave, right? You're this, that, and the other. I'm like, say it at my eulogy. Say it at my eulogy. I got things that have to get done first, right? And the easiest way to fail is to start thinking you're awesome. Oh, I'm so awesome. And the next thing you know, you get arrogant. And then when you get arrogant, no one's really helping you and everything can collapse on you. Be humble, recognize how lucky you are. I still see myself in the house, and the guy, when I open the door, the electrician's there and asking for my mom, and she's not there. I'm like 5 years old or 4 years old. And you see the pain on his face before he turns the lights off to the house while you're in it. And I still remember being that guy. And I always, and I used to think, boy, that was terrible. But being that kid, and still, I'm 58 and I'm still that 4-year-old kid. And that keeps me grounded. It also makes me want to make sure that everybody is treated with love and respect and has a chance to get out, just like I did. Anyway.
So then, Tim, that was a really loaded response. And I kind of want to get your take on something. And I'm just sitting here listening and learning so much from this. And I can't thank you enough for sharing and going into such depth and using personal examples, because like I said, this is just personally teaching me so much as I sit here. And I really thank you. I want to pick your brain about something that I was thinking about last night when I was thinking about things that we could talk about. And it goes back to an experience I had with Brooks Running Company. So I had ordered a pair of Brooks, and I started to wear these Brooks for about 2 or 3 months. They were okay for the first 2 or 3 months, but after the initial period that I used them, they started to hurt my toes a little bit. So I contacted the company, and they didn't even ask me to do much. They said, okay, you're not satisfied? I'm going to send you another pair of sneakers. So what happened when they did that was that I kind of felt like they had my best interest in mind, and that they were really caring for me. They didn't tell me to return the shoes to them. Instead, they told me, go ahead and donate them to a local charity. So they told me to do that, and that kind of blew me away. And then compared to another company, which I used, I told them I had such an issue, and they said there was nothing that they could do for me. So I think that this ties into everything that we're talking about values, principles, morals, and really caring about people. And that it not only is the right thing to do, but it can actually, and I'm not saying to do this for this reason, but it can actually drive sales, make your business more effective. There's a Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm not sure if you know who he is, but he's a really big deal in this whole field. But he has one of his big principles. It's called the book, The Thank You Economy. And a lot of it is the principle that if you show people, customers, that they really matter, that you're going to build that loyalty like you were talking about earlier. So can you just talk about how all of this relates really to helping attract the customer and then retaining the customer? Because I think that's so interesting.
Well, the attraction is harder, right? Because they have, if you haven't had an experience with somebody, you're trusting, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be you telling me and me trusting you. or me reading about it. In terms of retaining, right, it's like anything. Well, think about your friendships. Let's move it. Loyalty is actually what we call an isomorphic construct, meaning that it crosses domains and it means a lot. It has very similar meaning across those domains, except if you're loyal to your team, you're loyal, you support it and you defend it and reinforce it. If you're loyal to a friend, you defend it and reinforce it. Well, loyalty actually only matters when things are difficult. Okay, that's the only time that loyalty actually matters. Because if you are, by the way, this is what most of my research is on. So that's why I'm talking about this in kind of a technical way. So when you are dealing as a business, if you actually want loyalty, then you have to be willing to show that you are loyal to them. And that's where firms fail all the time. Right? They all fail at some point, but some fail consistently. And if you have a problem with something, the goal isn't to have somebody out there who is going to complain, or because how you treat them determines their lifetime value for you. If you treat them as a transaction, it's just like transactional friendships. Yuck. And you know what they are. We've all experienced them. Somebody is that you can get them a ticket to something, whatever it is, right? And then they don't want to hear from you when things aren't, when things aren't going your way, or you don't have something for them. Well, they're not the kinds of connections you want to keep. The same thing is true in the business world. You do not want to allow your customers to have a reason not to want to be loyal to you. And firms talk a great game about this, but very few do it very well, right? Your example with the running shoes, that one makes a lot of sense. I mean, why wouldn't they do this? First of all, there's a huge margin on running shoes. Sorry. How many customers are calling up saying I need new shoes because they're not working well? It's a tiny percentage. Replace the shoe. I make you happy. You tell me the story. It's on your podcast, right? It changed. The benefit to them is now enormous, because it's not just that they made you happy. You're actually more likely to buy those shoes in the future because they're not going to go south on you, right? This is a company that's already demonstrated that you care about them. Now, not only are you going to buy from them, you're going to try to get me to buy from them. I don't even know what these shoes are. You have to know how not trend-worthy I am, right? So, but that's a big deal. So you're not only, your customer value is no longer now just your purchase value, it's your referral value, right? And not only that, you're actually giving them insight as to how they should think about designing the product, because they don't want these problems to have. So you've now given them insight to guide their R&D development. Your value as a customer is through the roof if they're willing to use it. It's way more than your shoe sale. The problem is the way we value things economically. We look and say, how much did they spend right now here? That's a terrible system, especially for someone like you. How old are you? How old are you? You're 22. So in my world, you're a baby. Okay? If you're younger than my daughter, who's 25, you're a baby. Right? Which means people are going to get younger and younger over time as my daughter keeps getting older. So you are worth a lot to most companies, because if I can build you in to say, stay with me for an extended period, your buying value, plus as your economic worth goes up, your willingness to buy more, it should be a very obvious thing to companies, but that's not how we reward in companies. When you're with a public company, what you realize is that shareholder quarterly meeting becomes all encompassing. And so people do what we would call bad economics. They find a short-term gain that causes them longer-term pain. So the shoe company that wasn't willing to reward you, they actually made more money temporarily. They made it for that quarter, but they lost all future revenue. Not only that, they didn't just lose revenue from you, they lost it from anybody you were willing to tell about. If you have a problem, they're not going to be here for you. That is the antithesis of everything I believe in. It's one of the things that we talk about in service marketing. Because service marketing is all about focusing on retaining customers and getting them to give a greater proportion of their spending in the category to your business. And you're only willing to do that if you're better than everybody else. And better doesn't just mean that the product works better. It means that they're with you. They recognize you and the value that you contribute to them. And they have the mentality is different. It's we exist to serve you. We exist to serve you. And business done right should actually make the world a better place. That's what my argument's always been. It's the reason I got into the service space. Business done right should always be about making people's lives better. And not in some abstract way, but in a tangible way. And the thing that always causes dissatisfaction, I have my students always, I make them go out and do what I call service audit. Because we experience the services multiple times a day. And I make them kind of go through and describe the situations that delighted them and situations that dissatisfied them. Okay? And it turns out that almost all the time, what delighted you and what dissatisfied you related to how they treated you as a human being, not to the deliverable. How did they treat me as a human being? The thing that makes you dissatisfied is when they tell you, you are not important as a person. You are not important. And as soon as they tell you you're not important, there's nothing they can do to make it okay. Now, that comes with a bunch of problems for you as a manager and for you as a leader. For you to delight customers consistently, for you to delight your employees consistently, you have to have everybody do what they're supposed to do. Because it only takes one person to ruin it for all of you. One person to treat your customers or to treat your fellow employees like they don't matter. For everyone to be unhappy. Which tells you how important it is to be a leader and to hire the right people. Have the right people with you. And then to build those people up. There's a Richard Branson is famous for doing lots of great services, and they have a philosophy, and it goes like this: hire for attitude, teach skills. Hire for attitude, teach skills. Because you can't teach somebody to be nice. They either are or they aren't. But you can, come into my analytics class, it doesn't matter if you were an English major or a dance student or a musician. In fact, all the great analysts I know are musicians. Right? They just needed to make a living. They go, oh yeah, this kind of works for me. I'm not making that up, by the way. Alex Buey, who's coming, I was telling you about, my former coming to Fordham. He's at Fordham now. He's coming to work with us at St. John's. He was a musician before he did all that, right? We end up learning these things because you're able to do it if somebody teaches you. You can learn skills that you think are completely out of your league. that's just a commitment of time and people giving you frameworks that work for you, right? Some frameworks are going to work for other people, but everybody can kind of learn how to do something if they figure the tool set that works for them. But being nice, being a good person, that's inside you. And usually you're not a nice person because you're carrying something that makes you not like yourself. So you got to fix that before you should put that person out in front of the customer, right? And that's on us as individuals to fix ourselves. One of the most important things that I tell my students to always remember is everybody has a bad day. Everybody's carrying something, right? Their own story. Your most important role is to not make your bad day someone else's bad day. Don't make your bad day somebody else's bad day. If you can do that, you're going to be fine. And the other thing is, again, when I told you need to be surrounded by people that love you, make sure that you remember that in the real world, the people that really matter love you regardless of how your day went. If you can remember that, it makes bad days easier to bear. Because in the end, my son, as you saw, he doesn't care what my day was like. He thinks that I look like John Cena. Okay? As you laugh, right? Dad, he goes, you have a 4-pack. You're almost there. Right? Or whatever, right? And you're like, okay, whatever. It's those people are the reason we do things. And if you have to make sure that you don't allow circumstances that you can't control and people that don't really love you from affecting how what really matters. Bad things, come back and surround yourself with people that love you. Leave it all there. Make sure you fill yourself back up with people that love you. And then go back and share that love. And if you keep sharing that love, pretty soon you're surrounded by people who also start to brighten your world. And you can do that in your business life. I know because I got to do it. And then you can definitely do it as a professor. You get to do it even more as a professor, right? You just walk in and you let them know you love them. You don't like them. You love them. You love pizza. You love a movie, but you don't act like you love people. What the hell's that? I don't talk about loving food anymore. I love people. You can do this. You go in and it was Joan Ball's husband, Professor Joan Ball at St. John's, her husband, Martin Dominguez Ball. He told me, I was like, can you give me, your students love you, and how does that work? And he said, well, if they know you really care about them, they'll come with you. Just like your commanding officer was telling you. It's funny, leadership skills are so much easier than we make them out to be. They really are. They're basic humanity. They're basic humanity. Yeah, you need to know the skills. You need to know how to get people to do things better, because they might like you, but if you consistently lose, they're not going to keep you as the coach, right? So you got to get the skills right. But if you want them to really be all in, they need to know that you are in it to make this work for them within the organization. Well, I'm all about that. And the problem is as the companies get bigger and more complex, you know people less and less. The easiest way to tell how successful you are at a big company is how far away you are from the lowest person there, and even farther away from the customer. So you got to force yourself to get down there and to meet real people who will really tell you the truth. They have to feel comfortable that they can tell you the truth, the unvarnished truth that can hurt your feelings. But if you're willing to take that, you'll be better. You'll be a lot better as a person and as a leader and as a company.
Tim, I just want to follow up. I know you got got to help your son out. So I'm not going to keep you for too much longer. But there's something that you keep mentioning, which I find really intriguing. And I'll never forget that you said this, but you told the analyst that your job is to tell me when I'm full of shit. I feel like that is such a great attitude, and it shows a lot of vulnerability. You show them that I'm not perfect. I might be more senior than you, have a higher position than you, but I mess up as well. I am not perfect. So the question that I want to ask is, how does one get to that level? Because I feel a lot of people, when they do step into that position, or, they come into an organization, or they come into the military and they're more senior than somebody else. I'll give you a good example. In the military, for example, sometimes a brand new officer who is 22 years old, and I'm only saying this because I've heard of it from others. I haven't experienced it yet, but they'll step into the job, and now they're in charge of someone who's been in the military for 10 to 12 years. And they'll come in and think that it's my show, you do what I say, my way or the highway, right? And obviously there's going to cause friction there. So how does someone step into that role and then be so vulnerable like that? Because to me, that shows me that you're someone that's extremely secure in who you are, that you're letting someone else tell you, I want to know when I'm all messed up. So obviously you're secure in who you are. So how does one get to that point where it's like, okay, I want to know where I'm messing up so that I can get better from here? How do you develop that self-awareness, essentially?
First of all, it takes a while, right? You tell them that, and they think they're not sure you're serious. Fortunately, right, after a while, you have a bunch of people around them. No, he's serious, right? You don't have to worry. This is who he is, right? And I also try to make sure that I am human around them, right? Like I said, we're telling jokes, we're having fun. We aren't just, where's the work, where's the work, where's the work, right? For those officers, not those non-commissioned officers you're talking about that you're really going to be relying on, I would suggest that you say, look, we're in this together, and I need you, right? In the end, there has to be a final decision, right? Because we have to go down the path, and that doesn't mean we're always going to agree. But I want to be clear that your opinion matters. I'm not just going to listen. Most of the time, I'm going to probably agree with you. But without you your willingness to help me do this, and my willingness to show you every day, well, we're not going to be doing right by our men, and that's, or men and women. I'm sorry, that's not the. I should have said it the right way, but you know what I meant. We're not going to be doing right by the people who we're supposed to be taking care of. So that has to be our priority. I recognize that I'm young, but the funny thing is, I also recognize that even when I'm not young, I'm still not going to be getting it right all the time. Right? Yeah, I'll get it right more times because I have more experience. At the same time, I'm likely to make even bigger mistakes because I'll have more power. I need people to tell me the truth. I need to, and I'm going to tell you what I think, and you can say no, yes, but let's not be defensive, right? But he's going to need to see, or she's going to need to see, that you are who you say you are. Because in the very beginning, it's very hard. It's just words. Like I said, loyalty only matters in the tough times, when there is a strain. When you're sick, is that person coming to your side? Right? And once you show that you are really serious, that you've given up something to help that other person, then you can be comfortable that they are going to be with you. The other thing to remember is not everyone is going to reciprocate your loyalty. There will be a small percentage that don't, and it's going to hurt. You have to say, that is the price of being the person I want to be. And as I always say to everyone else, if you haven't had your heart broken, you probably haven't found the right person in your life yet. Right? And You didn't stop loving or seeking out someone because your heart got broken. So you don't get to do that here either. You don't get to do that in any relationship. When you're going to learn, and you're not going to become jaded. Never become jaded when someone doesn't do what you think they should have done, given all you've done for them. And remember, the most important thing about loyalty is everyone thinks they're loyal, and none of them think anyone else is. I am such a loyal person. Are you surrounded by lots of loyal friends? And the answer is always no. And then the answer is, well, how the hell is that possible? That's not possible. You can't be like this awesome loyal person and just have all these people that aren't loyal back. It doesn't work that way. So make sure that you are what what you aspire to be. You are demonstrating your concern for other people. You are fighting for them. And in the end, you'll be surrounded by people that will ultimately be there for you when you need them. And they're going to make you successful. Now, you're going to help them become successful too. That's the other thing, is don't pull the damn ladder up after you. Right? That's the other thing that helped me a lot, is if being loyal was helping those who were that I knew were worthy and were good people to achieve something. Because as I said, the worst thing is, which will tell my friends, the worst thing is to be successful, to get to the top of the mountain and find you're surrounded by people you don't like. Make sure good people can get up there with you. You do that, life is going to work. Life is going to work. And I'm just incredibly grateful. I frequently tell my wife, I'm married to the woman that I dreamed of before I ever met her, right? And I have a beautiful family. I have a job that I love. I'm pretty sure that this isn't really happening, right? It's just too good. Live your life like that. Be like, wow, how did I get this great life? The only way you get the life that you want is to be the thing that you want to be, or the world you want to see, kind of to paraphrase Gandhi, right? If you want to have a great world, you want a bunch of loyal people around you, you want people to work with you and to tell you what they need, you need to hear to help you be successful, be that person. Be that person who helps somebody else. In the end, the servant leadership, as they call it, like Ken Blanchard calls it that, right? Being that servant leader goes a long way. There's a difference between being a servant leader and being a doormat. We're not talking about just whatever, right? I give up. I'm not gonna really lead. But you're there to help other people. That's what your success should be about. And if I am successful, the only way I would really want it measured is that all the people that have had a relationship with me where they felt like they learned from me and that they got some benefit watching them become great. Okay, that is the mark of success, right? That's the real mark of success. Because in the end, your life is this tiny thing for a short time. You want to have a lasting legacy. I believe in an afterlife, but even if there isn't, you live in somebody else. At least an important piece of you does, and you mattered, right? And that's really the most important thing. Make sure your life matters, and that requires that you be a good person and that you care about other people. Anyway, I'm gone off on
Tim,
a
you kind of led me to the last question that I have. So the last question pertains to legacy, and my question is, hopefully not for another 50, 60 years, as I always tell everybody, but when your time does come, what is the legacy that you hope that you left behind and the impact that you made on those that you led, those that you loved?
Well, as a father, the first thing is I want my children to be contributing good people and wonderful members of society, right? And it's funny because the closer you are to somebody, the harder it is to get them to do what you think you would want them to do, right? Because they know you every day and they know all the warts and all that stuff. But that would be number one. I'm hoping that when I look down and on this planet from wherever we are, that I see them making a difference, and that I see them loving their fellow man. Number two, I want my students, since they're the ones that actually I think are going to have the ability to change the world. And I get to see more. I get to have so many come through classes, right? I want to know that I helped get them to believe in themselves, right? I don't care about the rest of it. I just want them to believe in themselves, that they can do this, and that they should do this. You know, I think that's one of the reasons that, when you go in and say, I'm not smarter than you, well, that's one thing. The other thing is, you were put on this planet to do great things, and you're more than capable of doing them. Believe in yourself. Don't quit. If I saw a lot of that, I mean, that would be joy. I look at some of my students now and I see all the things they're doing. And I'm always so impressed by them. We do ASL in all of our undergraduate classes, and they always make me so proud. And I'm just like, I tell my wife about it all the time. And she loves it so much that she's trying to make that kind of thing happen at Fordham, because that's all she hears me talk about. It's funny that she keeps wanting to steal our person in charge of ASL, which would make me very upset. So, because I love it. That would be number two. As a research scientist in the service space who believes that what we do matters and it's important for maintaining a civil society, I want this to become the philosophy we have as service researchers. I want it to be the norm of business, not something that we talk about and you go, wow, that's great. It's like, I'm hoping that in 20 years, when I'm gone, people don't say, well, that's radical. They go, that's how it is. The radical one is the guy who's not caring, right? That's what I want to happen. And so I try very hard to be a good example and representative for my field, which is expected from when you win this Lifetime Achievement Award. It doesn't just come with and here's a gold watch, right? And you go away. They don't do that. You have to be active in the field before they're willing to give it to you. So you have to have this long body of work. And what I want is for them to be open and welcoming and loving to the people in the field like they were to me, so that we can keep growing it and make these ideas so universally common that business doesn't look the way you think it, the way it does right now. And it's going to be leaders like you who have this vision that ultimately make these academic ideas real, tangible things. That would be my idea of success. I make enough money, my wife and I make enough money to our job is not to somehow wake up and have $8 billion in the bank, right? I don't care. I have everything I want. More money will not make me more happy. It's just going to make life more convenient, right? But I love my life. And I love it because my students give me a job. They pay me to do something I love doing, which is watching their eyes light up with, I can do this. And that's a remarkable thing. It's a gift, and they give me this gift. They think that I'm helping them. The reality is they help me much more than I help them. Every day I go in and I know that my life matters because I get to help someone who's going to change the world, and they've sat in front of me that day. That's a big deal.
I mean, Tim, so what I usually do is that I go on Instagram and I try to capture a moment in the interview in which was quotable and put a highlight on Instagram. But that'll be very hard to do with this podcast because this has been, I mean, I've picked up on about 10 quotes that you said. It's going to be very, very difficult for me to highlight one. I mean, tell me I'm full of shit. That was a great one. The one when you talked about tell me I'm awesome. That's a great way to fail. I mean, I feel like we've discussed leadership, business, life, values, morals, faith. And I can't even thank you enough because for me personally, going into that leadership role that we've been talking about, I feel like you've equipped me with so many tools to put in my arsenal, to put in my bag, that whenever I need to deploy them for the right reasons, of course, that I'll be able to hopefully lead, inspire, and motivate, etc., like you've been saying. And not only for me, but all other young adults and even people whom you work with, people your age. I feel like leadership is leadership, and it's just applicable to all different areas. But most importantly, I feel like you really shared so many critical life lessons that we can implement. And I truly see why your students love you so much. And during this short time that we've been together, you've given me and my audience so much of your time. And I really thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because this was one of the most genuine and authentic conversations I've ever had. So all I can really say is thank you so much for being with us.
It was an honor. I know you're going to do great things. I'm going to give you one little piece of advice. The biggest issue when somebody tells you how great you are and you're already a Poets and Quants top 100 is you're always worried, am I achieving my objective? Am I whatever? You know, the hardest thing to live up to is your potential. Relax. Do the Tony Robbins thing. Did that come through? I couldn't tell. Froze for a second.
I didn't hear that. Can you repeat it again? I'm sorry. You left off on the Tony Robbins thing and then cut off.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry. What I want to say is, you know, living up to your potential is the hardest thing, particularly when you're a high potential person like yourself. And so you put a lot of pressure on yourself too early. And as Tony Robbins said, we tend to overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate vastly what we can do in 5 or 10. I think I lost you again, didn't I?
Yeah, but I heard what you said about Tony Robbins' quote about how we overestimate what we can do in 1 year and then underestimate what we can do in 5 or 10.
That's right. So relax. You're going to get to your destination. Remember, this is a long journey. Careers are long. Don't go, I didn't make it, and judge yourself by somebody who has some sort of temporary success jump, right? You're on a long journey. Remember, as long as you're following your path, you're going to be fine. Stay on your path. Find your North Star and keep heading toward it.
I think that's so critical. And like you said, that when you do achieve things like that, it is like you're saying, you always feel like you got to live up to that par, and anything less than that seems to be like it's a failure and so forth and so on. But I think that, like you're saying, finding that North Star, and I feel like doing things like this podcast and providing that value is that North Star. And for me, it's really like trying, like you're doing exactly like you said, that is your passion, to try to help other young students to discover their North Star or something like that. But it's all individualized to each and every person. And the things that you've said today, I know for me, have made my North Star a lot more clear and focused. And now I feel like it's, like you said, adding value to each and every person that you encounter. And you can go back and ask my friends. That is what I always told them. And you've repeated it here constantly. So for me, it's like found a true mentor. And I know that my audience, you're definitely accessible. Like I got you on LinkedIn, for example, you know, and you're willing to help me right off the bat. So I know for other students that have you, that you're willing to do the same. And once again, Thank you so much for all of the advice. It's been truly an honor and a blessing. And thank you for taking so much time out of your day, Tim.
It really was my honor. Anyway, I wish great things for you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to yet another episode of the One Life podcast. I hope that you were able to take one or two of these ideas that we discussed today and are able to implement them in your life to make you more successful in whatever it is that you're chasing. Remember, only one life to live, no time to wait. Act now. See you guys on the next episode of the One Life podcast.